Now here again is Dr. Eboo Patel. Eboo, thank you for living out Gandhi's instruction to be the change you want to see in the world as peacemaker. You are a Shia Muslim from India. Your wife, Shanaz, is a Sunni from India.
That's right.
What led your parents to immigrate?
Well, America, as we hear over and over again, is really the land of opportunity. And that's opportunity on so many fronts. It's the opportunity to make a life for yourself in terms of economic and educational mobility, but it's also the opportunity to be who you are, to bring your faith tradition across the seas, to bring your culture and your language, to cook the food that was important to your ancestors, to pass down the stories that you were whispered, that were whispered to you in your ear when you were a baby. So I think when my parents looked across the ocean from India to America, they thought to themselves, I want to be a part of a nation that will allow me to be who I am and to contribute that to the broader fabric.
But is the sectarian conflict in India, the violence between Hindus and Muslims, troubling to you and disturbing?
Well, I think India, like America, like every nation, has multiple stories. And so I go back to India every year or two, and I have lots of Hindu friends in India and lots of Sikh and Christian and Buddhist and Jain friends and Muslim friends there. And we have a wonderful time together. So that is one story of India. It's a story of hundreds of millions of Hindus really having a powerful, positive relationship with their Muslim and Jain and Christian minorities. The other story of India is a story of religious conflict, which emerged really powerfully in the late 1940s, where 1 million, maybe more, were killed in sectarian conflict. I think the challenge for us, whether it's in India or it's in Iraq or it's in America, is which story are you going to bring to the fore? And America has stories of ethnic and religious conflict and ethnic and religious cooperation. And we just have to work and do everything we can to make sure that it's cooperation that dominates the 21st century and not conflict.
That's what I wanted to ask you about, Eboo. You beautifully laid out your dream for the future of America. What do you think are the greatest challenges we're facing right now in understanding the Muslim religion, just in a general sense? Where do we really need to progress in that regard, in your observation?
Well, I think that this is I appreciate that question very much, Daniel, and I think it's a challenge that Americans of Muslim faith and Americans of other faith or no faith at all share.
Okay.
And that challenge is coming to know one another. And I love, one of my favorite lines in the Holy Quran is that God made you different so that you could come to know one another. And we need to make sure that the lines of communication and openness are as clear as possible between us. There's a great line by the poet William Stafford that if you don't take the time to get to know me, and I don't take the time to get to know you, then a pattern that others made may prevail in this world. And following the wrong God home, we could miss our star. And I think we have to remember that the world still looks to America as an example of pluralism, as an example of cooperation across ethnic and religious lines. So what we do here in Chicago, in our high schools, in our communities, it matters elsewhere. We are still a city on a hill, and I think one of our great gifts to the 21st century will be as a model of religious pluralism.
Religious pluralism, is pluralism possible in all religions? I mean, after all, we have people in the same faith killing each other these days. I guess the question is religious diversity that would be possible even though there are Muslims who demand a Muslim state, Jews who demand a Jewish state, Christians in America who want a Christian nation. I mean, what about that internecine warfare and that exclusivity?
Right. Well, that's why I think that this century is going to be dominated by what I call the faith line. But we have to be very careful by who we put on different sides of that line. I don't think that as a Muslim I am on one side of the faith line and that Jews or Christians or Hindus are on the other side. I frankly think I share my side of the faith line with the vast majority of the world, Jewish and Christian and Hindu and Buddhist. And that side of the faith line is called the pluralist side. And we believe that people from different backgrounds should live together in mutual trust and loyalty.
I remember in 1993 when the Chicago Sunday Evening Club, the producer of this program, produced the documentary on the Parliament, the Centennial Parliament of the world's religions in Chicago. And Dave Hardin said, wouldn't it be great if the evangelical could say to the Muslim or the Buddhist to the Hindu or whoever, isn't it interesting how you see God? And that's what you're doing, isn't it, in the Interfaith Youth Corps?
Well, that's part of what we're doing. And a big part of what we're doing is about the energy of young people. And I really believe that if we're going to have religious pluralism in America or in India or in Iraq, young people are going to play a major leadership role. One of the great figures of pluralism in America is, of course, Martin Luther King Jr., an African-American Southern Baptist who not only called his white brothers and sisters to come together in one nation, but also learned profoundly from an Indian Hindu in Gandhi and marched arm in arm in Selma with an Orthodox Jew, Abraham Joshua Heschel, and carried on a correspondence with a Buddhist monk in Thich Nhat Hanh. And King, we have to keep remembering, was just 26 years old in Montgomery, Alabama, when he led the Montgomery bus boycott. So I see in my generation that same fire, that same power, and I think that it takes place largely in volunteer projects, in service projects to others.
I know we'd love to talk about that more. I wonder if I could ask you just a little bit more about the faith line that you laid out. Historically, this has always been an issue, hasn't it? I mean, throughout the centuries. Is there something different about this time in history that can give us a greater hope that we're going to get a little bit farther with this? Because there always seems to be a need for a bad guy or conflict somewhere in the world, and around religion many times. Do you have any thoughts towards that?
I think what makes the 21st century unique is the fact that people from different religious backgrounds live in close quarters with each other. So you actually see Muslims walking down the street. You hear Jewish prayer. You listen to Hindu and Buddhist chanting. And so there's a famous story several centuries ago. A German scholar would lay out his map, and in the center of it would be Europe, and everywhere else he would have written, "There be monsters." Because at that time, several centuries ago, people from different backgrounds were not in as frequent and intense contact. But today, we are. So I know that people from a different religion or a different nation or a different race aren't monsters. I know they're just as human as me. My question is, how can I cooperate with you to serve others? I think that if that's the question that guides the 21st century, how can I cooperate with you to serve others? We're going to have a good century. If that's not the question, we're in some trouble.
And that we all have more in common than in conflict. Now, you did your doctorate in the sociology of religion at Oxford. You were a Rhodes Scholar. How proud your parents must be of you. But you are a most accomplished young man. And is it appropriate for me to ask you how old you are on this show?
Sure, you can
Give
ask.
us a range if you'd like.
Right, I'm 31.
31.
But I want to say something on the topic of accomplishment, if I could. I think accomplishment and achievement are never finally measured, or even initially measured on CVs and resumes. I think that it is only measured, if at all, in terms of the service you offer.
But faith without action is no faith at all, and that's why I wanted to compliment you, as I did at the beginning of the program, for living out that instruction to be the change that you want to see in the world. But I am asking you about your age in the context of your accomplishments, because you are an amazing inspiration and example, certainly for young people, people of all ages. You're bringing people together for peacemaking, for understanding, for breaking down stereotypes, Eboo. What are the things that most excite you about what you have seen through the Interfaith Youth Corps?
Oh, that's such a great question. When I first started this organization, it was in 1998, and I was just beginning graduate school at the time at Oxford, which meant that I was at the doorstep to the whole world. I mean, England is much closer in proximity to Africa and to Asia, and so I would go there all the time. And I spent several months in South Africa. I spent some time in Kenya. I spent time in India and Sri Lanka. And everywhere I went, people would ask me to run a small interfaith youth program. I would bring these kids, these Hindu and Buddhist kids in Sri Lanka together, or kids from African traditionalist and Muslim and Christian and Baha'i backgrounds in South Africa. And I would ask them, how do you want to serve the world? And they would not only have these amazing dreams, but they would immediately want to make them into concrete projects. I thought to myself, my gosh, what enormous energy there is in young people all over the world. And if I saw one thing similar in young people in Kenya and South Africa and Sri Lanka and India and England and Turkey and the States, wherever else I've been blessed to be, it's an enormous energy to serve others. And I feel like in a way, all I'm doing is kind of getting out of the way of that energy as best as possible so that it can in fact serve others, and it can in fact do it in a cooperative and pluralist spirit.
Well, we're so blessed to have you here in Chicago as the home for Interfaith Youth Corps, and it touches so many people. And thank you so very much, Eboo, for joining us today.